Welcome back, everyone. Hi there. I'm Dr. Laura Jaggett, and you're listening to episode 16 of the How to Life podcast. Today's show is an important one. It's a topic that gave me a lot of anxiety when I was younger, as well as my kids now, and I think many people, and that is basic car maintenance. Having a car is awesome, but there are a lot of responsibilities and expenses that come with it. I've talked about some of those in a few MOMINARS on my YouTube channel, like oil changes, tire pressure, smog checks, registration, pumping your own gas. I suspect that some of the fear in dealing with these things is the potential expense. You know, a warning light comes on and rather than deal with it, you kind of ignore it, hoping it'll go away, or maybe you think it's just programmed to go on to get money out of you. And especially if the car seems to be running all right, you might have the tendency to ignore that. And then perhaps you have the impression that mechanics will rip you off, so you don't really trust what they say. So who do you trust? What's the truth about car maintenance? How long can your car go before it actually breaks down? Luckily, I have a couple of friends who graciously accepted my request to talk about this topic. Kiran, Gangarum, and Kgasago, whom we call J for short, are not mechanics themselves, but they are extremely knowledgeable about cars and how to maintain them so that you can get the most out of your vehicle for a long time. I asked them all about how to take care of and maintain your car, and since nothing's in it for them, you can trust their answers. You're going to feel a whole lot better knowing what you should do, when to do it, and what to notice and look for in your car's performance. This is a really fun conversation, and I had a great time talking with these two. And even I learned some things that I didn't know before. And it's my hope that you will too. So let me introduce you to Kiran and Jay, and let's get started. Hey, Kiran and Jay, welcome to the How to Life podcast. I'm very grateful that you're here to answer these questions. The reason I wanted to do this podcast is mostly because of my own kids. I have 4 kids and 3 of them are drivers. And every time I get in one of their cars, there's a light on or some sort of warning signal. And I'll ask them, how long has this been on? I'm like, when the light comes on, you have to do something. And this is a real quote. One of them said, I thought it was just a suggestion. So it's,
Oh, wow.
They won't listen to me, but perhaps they'll listen to you. Let's talk about some basic car maintenance and what needs to be done to make sure that you can get the most out of your car and it'll last you the longest. Because would you agree that if you don't do these little maintenance things along the way, eventually you're going to spend a lot more money in repairs?
The moment the light comes on, you need to take it to a workshop, establish exactly what's wrong, and then have that fixed. If you ignore it, the problem gets worse, and eventually it ends up being a bigger problem than initially it was.
Thank you for that, Kiran. All right, so let's start with oil changes. Why do you need to do an oil change in the first place?
So with an oil change, if you don't change it, as time goes, there's definitely going to be like corrosion within the engine. So what happens is now the performance of the car it's now very limited.
Now, how often does this need to be done? And is there a difference between older models versus newer ones?
Well, basically, you follow the manufacturer's recommendation. So basically, you do it every either 10,000 kilometers, 15 or 20,000, depending on what the manufacturer states. Okay, with the older cars, it's normally around 15,000. But now with us having a lot of diesel vehicles around and petrol vehicles around and late model vehicles or newer spec vehicles, that period differentiates. It's either 10, 15 or 20,000 Ks.
What's the difference between synthetic oil and standard oil?
Okay, synthetic is mainly for high performance vehicles. The properties in there are much better than just your standard oil. It kind of prolongs the life of the engine. The standard oil is just very basic oil, which you would use in your older vehicles. So I think rather go for synthetic oil if you got a late model vehicle. A lot of people want to cut down on cost and use a standard oil, which is slightly cheaper, but it's not healthy for the engine.
Even in the older cars, you can use synthetic oil?
Sure, that's a bit of a tough one. I think rather stick with standard or Just go with what your mechanics advises.
What's included in an oil change? So if you don't know, is there a standard protocol that they do? And what does that include?
An oil change is very basic. Normally, it's just an oil filter and your oil. And then you've got a sump at the bottom of the engine which collects the oil. That'll normally have an O-ring, a rubber ring that needs to be replaced as well. So it's something very cheap and very easy to do.
Now, since you don't have anything in the game here to gain, I've had conflicting information with oil changes. So on one hand, I'll have the mechanic that says, or the manufacturer actually would say, okay, you only need to change this once a year, assuming that I'm driving 12,000 miles a year. And then at another shop, the person told me that says, oh no, you need to change it every 5,000 miles. I said, why would the manufacturer tell me that I have to do it only once a year? And she said, because maybe they want you to create problems. What are your thoughts on that?
With regards to manufacturer specifications, sometimes it's not wrong to change it once a year, as long as the car's been, like used often. If your car stands for 6 months, what happens is the oil thickens. So in that case, if you decide to use it after a long period, rather have an oil change done. When you drive your vehicle, if you don't reach the specific mileage within a year, you either service it within, at that mileage or every year. So say, for instance, the manufacturer says you can drive your vehicle for 10,000 miles, and after 10,000, you service your vehicle or you change the oil, or every year. So in a year, you only did 5,000 miles. So it means you now need to do the yearly service. So you got that choice either between the mileage or the year, whichever comes first.
That makes sense, and I believe you. Thank you. So when you see the check engine oil light, or you see that you have gone a certain amount of miles, and I want you to tell my kids, change your oil.
Exactly. You change your oil. If not, you're going to be standing on the side of the road.
Okay.
Stop.
Then you call mom.
She's not going to show up.
I'm not going to get there. I told you to change your oil.
What happens if you don't change your oil? Let's do worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario is the oil is going to lose its viscosity. Okay, so basically that's the thickness of the oil. All right, and if the oil becomes too thick, you're going to either see the car smoking, or you're going to feel the performance of the car is going to lack. So it's going to be detrimental to the engine.
Let's move on to tires now. The low tire pressure symbol, which is in the back of your owner manual. If you just look at the troubleshooting signs, you can see what that little symbol means. Let's talk about that symbol. What should we do?
So what you do basically, the moment that symbol comes on, it's giving you an indication that the pressure is low in one of your tires. Some vehicles will indicate which tire the pressure is low, and most vehicles, it just gives you the low pressure light. So you need to go to your nearest garage and check the pressure. Make sure that the pressure is equal all round. And if you don't know what pressure to fill into your tires, it's normally indicated on the driver's door. So if you open up the door on the side panel, you would see an indication of what pressure you would put into your front tires and what pressure you would put into the rear tires. So that should not be ignored, because you will eventually end up with a flat tire, and then now you need to put your spare on.
You're assuming that everyone has a spare. You should have a spare in your car. If you have a newer car, usually the spare comes when you buy it, correct?
With the newer cars, there's a lot of newer cars that do not come with the spare. They come with what you call run flat tires. So if you have a puncture, you can still continue driving, but not for thousands of kilometers. You drive to the nearest workshop or a tire center where they could check your tire and replace it.
So if you do have run flats, which I do on my car, you will get a warning sign that it's punctured. Even though you're driving on it, if there's a puncture, the warning sign will come on.
Yeah, it will come on. And if it's completely punctured, then you would find that the car is leaning to one side. And then you can drive to the nearest tire center, not too fast, but at a reasonable pace. So yeah, those are the things you need to take into account.
how often should we fill the tires? If you don't have a computer to tell you it's time to fill your tires, what does it feel like when your tires are low, and how often should you check them?
With the tires, basically a car has to have balance. So if now all your tires are all filled up, so your car is going to be running nice and smooth. So once now there's like a lack of pressure in one of your tires, so it loses a little bit of balance. So as you're driving, you can feel that, okay, it's leaning constantly towards the left or to the right. So it will definitely be a clear indication of sort of where pressure is actually needed.
Now, tell me a little bit about rotating the tires. How often should this be done, and why do you need to rotate your tires?
With the tires, every 10,000 kilometers, have a look at your tires, because when the wearing off occurs on your tires, what happens is when you brake, your car doesn't actually stop immediately right where you try to brake it. And even on the pedal as you go, it goes a bit deeper on it. So that just clearly means now that the tires are slowly just wearing off. So they clearly need to be changed at that time.
Laura, just to add to that, when you rotate tires, you're actually prolonging the life of the tires. Because you have a front-wheel drive vehicle and you have a rear-wheel drive. So if you have a front-wheel drive vehicle, it means the drive of the vehicle is on your front tires, and that's going to wear quicker than the rear tires. So after 10,000 kilometers, you rotate them. So now your rear tires, which is not on the drivetrain, comes to the front, and that now will prolong the life of your tires. So they all actually wear down equally.
Otherwise, one axle is doing more work than the other.
Yes, 100%.
Yep.
Let's go to wiper blades. Now, I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is a desert. So it is very hot here and it does not rain much. So we have a lot of split wiper blades at the end of the summertime. I mean, that's a big sign. But when should you change your wiper blades before this happens?
So with the heat, the wiper blades becomes brittle. So when you get into your summer season, just before the rainy season starts, check your blades, and if it needs to be replaced, replace them, because obviously you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you have a heavy downpour and your wiper blades are not doing what it's supposed to.
Here in the States, we have parts stores, and you can go in and you can't just buy them off the shelf because there are so many different sizes. And I'm just telling this to the audience, not to you guys, because I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
You just go in and you tell them what the make, year, and model of your car is. They look it up in the computer and they know exactly what size to get you, and they will go and get it for you. And then if you're lucky and you smile nicely, perhaps they'll put it on for you. Just a little pro tip for the audience there. But you can do it yourself. It is possible, but it's so much easier when somebody who knows how to do it and does it often can do it for you. Let's talk about the battery. There's really not much to do until you see the battery light go on. What does that mean? And what is imminent when that light goes on?
Okay, with the battery, once that actually starts happening, what it means is there could be a leak on your battery, which you can easily smell as you're driving. There's like an acidic smell that you're smelling. So if you can't actually smell it, you can definitely see it. As you open your bonnet, you'll definitely see a leak. And that would definitely mean your battery now needs to be changed.
Laura, there's two things that could be wrong if your battery light comes on. You have an alternator that charges the battery. Okay, so if your alternator is not functioning the way it's supposed to, and if it's not charging it, giving it the voltage that it needs, your battery light is going to come on, which is an indication that there's low voltage going through the system. So you either need to have your alternator checked out or go to a battery center and have your battery tested. And either or will be able to determine which is the problem.
Okay, how long does a battery typically last?
Oh, that's a good question. It all depends on how often you use the car. And this may sound weird, but if you don't use your car, the battery life is shortened because your battery needs to be continuously discharging and charging to keep it active and to prolong the life of it. So if you have a car that's standing and you're not using it, within 2 weeks, your battery is going to run down completely. And you will then need to boost it. And by boosting the battery, you're actually doing more damage to your battery because
Really?
it will get back, it will recharge and stuff like that. But now you're shortening the lifespan of the battery. So a battery can last you a long time, sometimes 5 to 10 years, and sometimes it'll last you maybe 2 to 3 years. So there's no definitive lifeline of a battery. It all depends on how often you use the car, and also depending on if you keep your car standard as well. When I say standard, you get a lot of guys who want to install a sound system in the vehicle, and everything gets loaded onto that little battery, and that battery now has to start the car and run the sound system and all that. So there's a lot of factors that contribute to the lifespan of the battery.
I never knew that either. See, I'm learning things here too. What are the signs that your battery is dying? Maybe your car has trouble starting?
Yep, most definitely the kick. Once you actually start, you definitely feel the kick is not the same anymore. So when you start and the battery is like good to go, one kick it goes. But then when the battery is now constantly dying, when you actually start now, you get a problem now with just the kick.
So you hear the engine dragging, it's like battling to start. It's like
Right.
2 or 3 swings before it starts.
Will a battery ever go out while you're driving and then the car will just lose power? Can that ever happen?
Okay, I'm going to tell you something that's going to shock you. Okay, so when you start your car, you can literally take your battery out of the car and your engine will still run. And the reason for that is your alternator is going to run the vehicle. The battery is only there to store the charge and to start the car, to give it that full power. But once the car is running, you can take off the terminals and you can continue driving.
That is fascinating. So there's really no maintenance for battery other than just drive your vehicle.
Yeah, 100%. Just drive your vehicle constantly, you won't have an issue. With the older vehicles and the older batteries had little terminals on the top of it. So you'll probably have about 6 to 8 slots. And those are your cells of the vehicles. And those batteries, you need to check the distilled water level to make sure it's constantly filled. The level has to be above the electroplates. So that's maintenance on those batteries. And they're now doing away with those. Now you have sealed batteries where there's no maintenance at all.
That was fascinating about batteries. I learned a ton during that little section. Thank you. Let's move on to brakes now. What are the parts associated with the braking system?
Brake pad. The function now of the brake is basically relying on that. It's because as you brake, you can definitely feel that, okay, it takes a second for me to basically stop right where I predict I'm going to stop. And if you go a little bit deeper, then you know that, okay, there's a little bit of wearing off going on. So you need to definitely get it checked out as well.
How often should you change your brake pads?
Okay, brake pads, there's no specific time period. It all depends on how you drive your vehicle. So if you brake hard, you're going to change your brake pads more often than usual. Okay, so a lot of guys who have performance vehicles, they want to show off how fast the car goes, but then when you need to stop, the car needs to stop as fast as it took off. If you understand what I'm saying. So that means you have to press your brake pedal much harder to stop that car sooner. So by doing that, you are wearing down your brake pads quicker. So it all depends on how you drive your vehicle.
So when should you go to get them checked? When you start feeling it's harder for the car to stop?
Normally, when you take your vehicle in for a service, your mechanic will check the thickness of your brake pads, and he will give you an indication of how soon you need to have your pads changed.
If you've ignored the signs that your car is not stopping as well as it did, and then you go to get your brakes checked, but you didn't change the pads, you've worn the pads out, what will happen once the pads are worn out?
Okay, so your pads run on a disc where your wheel fits on, and that's responsible for slowing down the vehicle. So if you do not replace your pads, and if you run it metal on metal, you're now going to damage the disc, and that's an added expense, and it's not a cheap fix. It's really going to set you back. So it's important that the moment you feel or your mechanic advises you to replace the pads, you replace them, no questions asked, because that's a safety hazard on the vehicle. Laura, I just want to add on to your initial question when you asked about the brake components. Okay, so the brake components consist of your brake pads. Okay, you've got a disc that the pads hold onto to slow the vehicle down, and then you've got the brake fluid. Okay, and then you've got the system that pumps the fluid to the pads. So all these work together with each other. So if your brake fluid is low, it's going to affect the performance of your brakes. Okay, and if your brake pads are low, it's also going to affect the performance of how the vehicle is going to slow down. On the older vehicles, you've got drums, which is on your rear tire, and those take brake shoes. So there's a difference between brake pads and brake shoes. All your later model cars that you get nowadays, they have brake pads front and rear, which is more effective in slowing down your vehicle. But the older vehicles got brake shoes, which goes on the rear, and those are much bigger than your normal brake pads that go on the front. And that also is there for your handbrake on the rear, on the older vehicles. So when you pull up your handbrakes, your brake shoes expand and it locks your rear tires. So those are just the components that's associated with braking.
So the key really is to be aware of your vehicle. Be aware of how it's moving, how it's smelling, how it's feeling.
Most definitely. It is very important to just once in a while, just go around it, check your tires, just have a look. You could actually notice some of the things that would, problems that could have arose, and you could basically just come up with ways to just prevent them from even happening in the future, and avoiding having to spend a lot of money on damages when you just keep on driving with your engine light on and not knowing what could happen, like with the brakes, because like you definitely will be in trouble once that happens. So you definitely need to be very vigilant on that.
Just to add as well, when you drive your vehicle, you know exactly what your vehicle sounds like when you pull off, when you're slowing down, when you're changing gears. And it's important to, as you mentioned, to observe your vehicle, to understand the smells that you get when you're in your vehicle, when your vehicle is running 100%. And to just keep that at the back of your mind every time you get into your car. And the moment you sense something that's out of the norm, a light should go on and you should say, let's have my vehicle checked out. Because if you ignore it, it's just going to lead to bigger problems and more expensive problems.
I think a lot of people ignore these things because they fear the expense at the moment, not realizing that by ignoring it, it's going to be a greater expense, or worse, you'll have to get a new car.
Agreed.
What's the difference between a minor tune-up and a major tune-up? What's involved and when should you do this?
Okay, so a minor tune-up is a very basic service on the vehicle. So basically, you would change your oil filter, your air filter, and your fuel filter. There's something called a pollen filter. That's for your aircon. So when you start getting kind of a musty smell in your vehicle when you turn your aircon on, you know that your pollen filter needs to be changed. So that's part of your minor service.
I just learned something here. One of my kids has a weird smell in her car. Now I know what to do. Thank you, Kiran.
That's
Thank
a
you.
pollen filter. No, you're welcome. I think I need to start charging for these consults. Okay, and then you get a major service. Now, a major service is something that is vitally important to your vehicle. When your major service is due, and when you get the bill or a quotation and it's too much, do not settle for a minor service, because these are the important parts of the vehicle that need to be changed at that specific time to keep your vehicle running at its optimum. And the components there you'd be looking at are spark plugs. Okay, sometimes you might need injectors to be changed depending on the model of the vehicle. But then all the stuff that the minor service contains, you change that as well with your spark plugs.
Are belts and hoses changed at that time as well?
Yes, in most vehicles it is. And there's one belt that's called a cam belt. That is very, very important. And that gets changed around 90,000 kilometers of driving. If you do not change that, and if that belt snaps, your entire engine will seize. And then you are in for lots of money. I think you need to go and gamble to hit the jackpot to pay for that bill.
Is a cam belt included in a major tune-up, or is it something they inspect at least at that time?
100%. They inspect it at every major service, and then when it comes time to change it, there's no inspection done. You change it at that specific time. Even if it looks good, you change it, because now you can run the vehicle for another 90,000 kilometers and know that you're going to be fine. You're not going to have your engine seized. A major service would be done probably every second service. So, for example, you bought a brand new vehicle, and according to the manufacturer, your first service is at 15,000 kilometers. And then your next service, which is at 30, that would be your major. Okay? So you kind of skip one minor, one major, one minor, one major.
And then change the cam belts
At,
at 90.
yes,
Any
at
other
90.
belts that need to be changed before they snap?
You've got two other belts. One is for your fan belt, which cools the vehicle down. It works in conjunction with your radiator. And then you've got an air conditioning belt. Obviously, those are for cars that have air conditioning systems. So those belts will need to be changed. But basically, you inspect them at every service. And when the mechanic says, listen, this belt is not looking good, we need to change it, then you change it.
What are the symptoms when one of the belts are wearing out? Do you hear a sound? Do you smell something?
Okay, so basically, there's no real symptoms until that belt is really breaking, it's on its way out. So basically, your best form of being cautious is inspect it at every service. If a belt is on its way out, it'll start peeling off bit by bit, and then you will start hearing different sounds from the engine. That's when you pull over or you go to the nearest garage, open up the hood and inspect and see what's going on.
Does it make a whirring sound?
Yeah, it will make a whirring sound, or it will make like a knocking sound because the belt is stripping away and now it's hitting components around it. And then you're going to start hearing weird sounds.
You had mentioned the part of the cooling system before. Is there anything that we need to do to maintain the cooling system?
Yeah, the cooling system is a very critical part of the engine. Without the cooling system, the engine will overheat, it will seize, and then you're in for a new engine. So the maintenance there is basically to make sure that the water level is always at its optimum. It's always topped up. If the water level drops, you will get a light on your dash giving you a clear indication that you need to top up your water level. In the summer seasons, you guys need to have a coolant put in there. Because of the high temperatures, the water is going to stay constantly hot in your radiator. And with that, you need the water to run through the entire system to keep your engine cool at all times.
If you're traveling and your car overheats, you'll get a warning sign. And when it says that your engine is too hot, would you say to pull over immediately?
Yes, it's very advisable that you make sure that you just pull over, get to the nearest garage, get it checked out so that you get some cooling done on it. Because should it go, then you are in for a big one.
Once the light comes on stating that the water level is low, you need to pull over immediately. You need to flag someone down, get them to assist you to put in water to top it up. Or you can phone someone to come through and bring you water. But do not drive the vehicle if the water is low, because an engine can heat in a matter of 10 to 15 minutes. And the moment it heats, the engine will seize.
In addition to ruining the car, is it dangerous to your person if you drive when the engine is too hot?
Yeah, 100%. It is dangerous because if your engine seizes while you're on the motorway, you're stranded on the road. So to prevent that, the moment you get that indication, you pull over or drive to your closest garage. And if you know the garage is too far away, pull over, call someone for help, ask them to bring you some water.
But if you have a hot engine, do you put water in right then and there, open the hood, or no?
Okay, you open up the hood. When you're going to open up the radiator cap, that's where the danger is because it's at its boiling point. So you need to take a cloth, you place it over because the cap is going to be really hot. You open it up with the cloth, but you open it up just a little bit to release a bit of pressure. If you open it up all at one go, it's going to explode. This cap is going to shoot out, the boiling hot water is going to come out like a volcano, and it's going to burn you and it's going to cause a lot of damage. So rather just pull over, wait for it to cool a bit, and then you open it in stages.
Or wait for somebody to come and help you. That's probably your best bet. If you're not 100% sure of what you're doing, wait for help.
Yep.
Finally, I want to talk a little bit about gas and gas types. These higher performance cars, they require a higher level of petrol, gasoline. What happens if you put a lower amount on because it's too expensive to put the good stuff in? What happens?
Okay, so you've got the older vehicles, which uses the lower grade petrol, which is cheaper. Okay, and then you've got the newer vehicles, which uses the higher grade. Now, the higher grade is a faster burning fuel, okay, of which your new engine needs. And if you don't put that into your vehicle, you're going to have issues with the injectors. And the injectors is what gets the fuel first, and then it burns. And the combustion that you get from there drives the vehicle. So if you're going to put a lower grade in there, it's going to struggle to burn that fuel, and it's not going to perform the way it should. And now you are straining the vehicle, and eventually your injectors are going to pack up. And when your injectors break as well, it's a major expense. So rather spend that little extra and put the correct fuel in, and give your car the optimum performance rather than letting it struggle with the cheaper fuel.
If you're going to spend the money on a higher performance car anyway, just go the distance and put in the proper gasoline.
Exactly.
Can you put a higher octane in a vehicle that doesn't require it? Does that matter at all?
The older vehicles are not fuel injected. They have a carburetor, and it's not advisable to use the higher grade petrol on there because it's not designed for faster burning fuel.
When you open your gas tank, it'll tell you what type of fuel to put in. Use what the car recommends, correct?
Exactly, yes.
That answers all of my questions on basic car maintenance. Thank you very, very much. This topic was actually requested, so I appreciate you taking your time. And I also appreciate the fact that you're just knowledgeable on car maintenance. You don't have a shop. There's nothing for you to gain here. So everyone who's listening, this is the truth. You're hearing it from someone who has nothing to gain. So if you're ever nervous because you think a mechanic is telling you something that you don't need just so that they can make money, now you have some information and you're armed with education, which is the key. Kiran J., thank you so very much for taking the time to answer all these questions. I feel relieved. I learned something, and I've gotten pretty far into life, learning by mistake, by the way, trial and error. So I think that everyone who's listening here is now ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks for having us. It's really been a pleasure being on your show, and I'm glad I could make things a little bit easier for your viewers in terms of car maintenance. And just a bit of advice, always stick to a mechanic that you trust and that you know. If you take it to someone because you are told you'll get a better quote, remember, you get what you pay for.
That's very good advice. Thanks, guys, very much. Be well. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I just love these two. Wasn't that helpful? I really hope that you feel a little more secure about what to do and when to have your vehicle serviced. If you keep a regular maintenance schedule, your car will last you a very long time. Just take care of it, and it will take care of you. If there was something that I missed, or if you have any questions, comments, or you need clarification, please send me an email to drlj@howtolife.com. As you could probably tell, Kiran and Jay are not from the United States, so I will decipher, clarify, and convert some of the terms that they used, even though you probably got the gist. All of this will be listed in the show notes at howtolife.com/016. If you haven't already and you are enjoying this podcast, I would love it if you would give it a 5-star review on Apple or your favorite podcast platform. And if you have some time, a nice review would really help out in getting this show further recognition. If you recall, in the intro, I mentioned that I've done some MOMINARS on basic car maintenance on my YouTube channel, How to Life. A MOMINAR is a very short video tutorial about all sorts of basic life skills. So maybe you want to head on over there and check some of those out. And consider subscribing to both the podcast and the YouTube channel. Thanks so much for listening today. I really appreciate all the support and the suggestions for topics. I hope that you're getting some good information and relief now that some of these mysteries are not so mysterious anymore. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great week. Make it a great week. Pay it forward and help someone else out in any way that you can. Be kind, be grateful. All is well. You got this.